The Bounty Hunters. "Hey, kindergarten! How you doing?" J3 calls out as he sees their guide to Octaron Spin. The massive station is built around a gigantic asteroid, and its main administrative components are within the asteroid itself, as well as most of the infrastructure. The rest are accommodations in 8 massive sections like an 8-sided metal nut with a rock jammed in the middle. They had just entered from the designated landing platform, which they'd just rented. 397. "J3, you son of a bitch, I told you not to call me that. It's Jackie Kelvin or JK, the man shouts back. "Fuck you!" J3 bellows as he takes the lead of the group, power walking towards JK. "Fuck you!" JK replies as he nearly jogs to intercept J3 as they keep shouting, "Fuck you!" back and forth at each other endlessly. Then they throw their arms out and slam into a hug with a laugh. "Ah, man, it's good to see ya!" JK exclaims, and he then turns to the rest of the group and opens his arms to them with a massive smile. "Welcome to Octaron Spin, you filthy animals. You heard my name, I know yours. So let's get started so you don't get your dumb asses killed pulling a stupid." "Is this place that dangerous?" J3 asks. "Hell to the fuck yes. There's an entire sector that walking into it is just asking for your ass to be kidnapped and maybe even branded as some alien thoughts fuck meat. Benny B barely dodged that fate and we had to kill like 15 people to save him." "What the hell's going on here?" Pukey demands in shock. "We've got an over-the-top, violent, and puritanical religious cult that's settled down and effectively has conquered one of the sections. Hardcore misandrists, these women make Earth's most over-the-top, slap her in a burqa, she's not to speak to strangers or even learn to read level Muslims look tame." "You're kidding," Mustard replies, as the image conjured in his mind sends a shiver down his spine. He'd seen that shit up close. Nope. Puritanical loonies mixed with straight-up criminals make a nasty combination. That's why I wanted to talk to you guys before anything else happens. There are places you should not go unless you expect a monster of a fight ahead of you. There are places that are dangerous to go into. A full section of the station is deliberately flooded to accommodate the large number of amphibious and aquatic races we get out here. Each section is a culture and environment all its own. It's kind of cool in this section, but if we go one to the left, the temperature triples and the one beyond it is underwater. This may be a station, but it's maybe best to think of it like a miniature planet. It's got a population rivaling a country. Okay, that's a lot to be concerned about. This whole station is neutral territory? The only laws are the ones of the station, which are don't do anything to damage the station or the station staff. Pay your dues. No other laws exist here, meaning I'm safe. You guys are kind of safe. You've paid for a month of docking already. The last one's a sticking point. Kidnapping and murder are all right, but doing it with the intent of enforcing another place's laws is a no-go. But defending yourself is always fine, so if you find one of your bounties here, you need to provoke them into attacking you first, and then you can do whatever." JK remarks, and Pukey looks confused. "I was informed there was a no-killing rule from your reports." Pukey remarks, and JK shrugs and gestures for everyone to follow. "Not a rule, but a good idea. Basically, killing someone straight out can start a riot. Someone picking a fight they can't win will just get them laughed at. Straight-up murder will piss everyone off, and if it's found out you kicked up a riot, which is easy to do even at the best of times, then there's a walk out the airlock in your immediate future." Sensible. Now the reports mention something about the women here being thirstier and more irrational than usual. Care to elaborate on that? Few races in the galaxy want to drag their men into dangerous lives. Pirates keep their men well away from places like this, and in general on a station or outpost this lawless, the ratio of men to women stops being on the floor and starts burrowing past the foundations. The ratio here is roughly 1 per 1,000 rather than 1 per 100. "Good Lord," the Hat mutters as JK walks up to the large crate he was sitting on. "Is there good news?" "I've got a present for you. Is that good news?" JK asks, and there are smiles all around. "All right, now all these toys work well and hard on this station and in every part of it, even underwater. In our free time, we've been having fun putting all this together," he says, cracking open the crate and unfolding the front to reveal rows of weapons. Lasers, plasma, and an entire series of strange Kutha badges. Each of the weapons also has a smaller one of the badges worked into the side. 10 pistols and 10 rifles total with a modified plasma cannon. All of them glint with the words "the Chainbreaker" worked into the Kutha. I didn't know if you had a specific marking, so I just had the Chainbreaker engraved into the sides. "These are awesome, but why?" "We're rocking a huge number of laser and plasma weapons, and we got Kutha for days." Pukey asks as he picks up the cannon and then sinks his cyber arm into the port. It links up perfectly. These are modified. One of the biggest problems on any space station, let alone a pirate station, is a weapon that can pierce the hull. That shit can get you lynched in respectable places here? Hoo boy! Anyways, these lasers have the nickname of ablators. They don't go much deeper than the skin, but they'll give your ass heat stroke and burn off your clothes while hurting on a scale that sunburn is downright relaxing by compare. It'd take days of a concentrated beam to pierce the hull, though, so they're fine. And the plasma? Airfarce asks as he grabs one of them. Cold burn by comparison, they come out bright yellow instead of blue. So there's no real penetrating power, but you still get the bang, so it's more like a concussion grenade launcher, leading to its nickname of Banger. It'll knock over small crowds like bowling pins, and the rifle version has more range and accuracy. The cannon can throw around small vehicles. All of this can kill if you aim right, but a quick blaze of them is pretty standard if someone's being a massive shit. JK explains as everyone grabs a pair of pieces for themselves. They make a point of having one of the ablator and Banger each. So what do these badges do? Clip them onto your belts. These are lifesavers. JK instructs as he lifts up his t-shirt to show that he's got one on his belt as well. These give you 4 hours of limited atmosphere and force field when you run Axiom through them. After that, they need 8 to recharge, but they will save your asses if you're dragged into the water deck or thrown out the airlocks. Don't use them as a spacesuit or a dive suit, because it does nothing to stop micrometeors and the like from reducing you to Swiss cheese, and in the water it keeps the air around you so you shoot up to the surface no matter what you want, and it's pretty much impossible to swim. If we're blown out the airlock, it'll give us time to be rescued if nothing else. Thanks. May I assume that them being on the guns means they'll be protected from the water and vacuum as well? Pukey asks, clipping one of the chainbreaker badges onto his belt. Indeed, it'll also let the plasma work in the vacuum if you have to. But you don't need to worry about rescue out the airlock. The asteroid the station's built around already has a slight magnetic field and gravity well. Couple that with the bleed out of artificial gravity and you might go flying out for maybe 5 minutes, but then you start coming back. All told, the round trip is about 15. Long enough to kill you, but if you can keep yourself alive during it, then you're safe. How'd you figure this out? Mr. T asks in shock. One of the crazies on the station pulled a stupid and was blown out the airlock in response. A while later, we found her corpse on the outside hull. This got us curious, so we blew a tracking beacon out of lock and it made the round trip in 15 minutes. Next time we blew out Carl in a spacesuit with a tracker, and while it wasn't fun, it was still just 15 minutes. JK explains, and the gears in Pukey's head start turning. What's the protocol for when someone drags someone else out the airlock with them? Pukey asks, and JK shakes his head. Doesn't happen. Though I'm fucking fascinated for what happens when you do it, JK remarks. You might beat us to the punch, Dong remarks as he examines the ablator closely and takes notes of the changes it's had made to it. Not likely after the examples we made of the religious fanatics that targeted us. We've been left the hell alone, JK remarks. What example did you make? Bike asks as he fiddles around with a data chip that was next to all the badges. It's a production manual for a 3D printer if they feed Kutha into it. More of these badges in both the personal and weaponry scale. That while we commonly sheathe our knives in our boots, we can sheathe them in any part of another person faster than most can react, JK remarks with a savage smile. So they got the point? J3 asks flippantly. Oh yes, they got the point, and as the idiots were trying to make one themselves by broadcasting it, they displayed just how much of a point we had to make instead, JK says with a chuckle. That'd do it. So, the gifts are great, but how about playing tour guide? This station is old to the point that people live their whole lives on it, so no doubt there's a lot to see, Pukey remarks as he holsters his new guns. Yeah, sure, this way then, JK says. Now, the first thing you need to know is that each and every 9 parts of the station are both interconnected and independent. There's a main control hub, an agricultural deck, a commercial deck, a manufacturing and industry deck, and residential areas in each one. Only the station staff is allowed in the central area, that's where we live. The control hubs are also under our command and the only way into the central hub. Get it? Got it, Airfarce notes as he looks up and around. Good, now each deck has a different layout. This is Section 3, or the dim docks. Lower light and temperature as well as more manufacture and docking areas. It's the main entrance point that people coming and going enter from. This is the most trafficked area, so if any of your targets show up unexpectedly, it'll most likely be in this section. They all have different layout, don't they? Pukey asks, and JK nods as he leads them out of the area and through an archway with a force field they can walk through but not see through. It ripples like water as he passes through it. They step through and into a dark, dim city with numerous neon signs illuminating all kinds of goods and services in far more languages than merely galactic trade. The dizzying bustle of aliens moving all over the place and the occasional shout of rage and laughter in the simulated night are almost overwhelming to the men. "Welcome to nightlife, also known as the dim docks or Section 3, JK says with a smile. He then points both to the left and right directly at massive buildings in the distance and goes straight up along the distant dividing walls. Those are the bulkheads which lead not only from one section to the next, but also up and down to the next decks. Above us directly is the Shadow Forest, an arboreal wonderland just barely cold enough for your breath to be seen. Beyond that is the industrial area where refining and production happens. If you want some illegal mods to your ship, that's where you get it. Section 3 has some absolute monsters for plasma batteries that when powered down register as 3 levels of magnitude lower than the actual output. Further still is the residential area where the permanent residents live, and beyond that still is the control hub. You won't be going in there, but I'll be one of your men inside. Any questions? The other decks? Pukey asks as he takes note of the tall, rising buildings with walkways between them going upwards for what looks like a mile. He dodges something disgusting falling from above, and JK leads them off to the side and under the overhang of a shop that's closed with a 4-hour countdown on it. Section 4 is that away. JK begins pointing to the left. Shrunkland or the Hivers. Most of the food comes out of it, and it's mostly inhabited by the smaller races. Beyond is Section 5, uptown also called Posh Place. Sells fancy clothes and luxury goods. If you just want something high class, that's where you get it. He explains to the men, and he gives them a moment to process. Section 6 past it is Mechandeck or Techland. Advanced computers, hard workers, and laser technology. Also rumors of a new kind of energy shield coming out. I don't know much. Section 7 beyond is the Biodeck. A lot of tech has organic technology equivalents for cheap and easy replacements. A lot of refracting crystals are grown rather than cut. We got a farm for 'em, but it's also the playground of the more predatory races. Venture at your own risk. He continues his explanation before sighing in frustration and half-remembered annoyance. After that, we've got the religious part, Section 8. It's mostly conservative gravids who will be a bitch to deal with. They sell the most medicine, and if you're not a dude, it's the safest and most stable part of the station. Then it's Section 1, the wetworks. It's all underwater, but it exports a lot of food and synthetics. Right next to us that way, he says, jerking his thumb to the right, is Section 2. Colosseum. Yes, like in ancient Rome, yes, blood sports. It sells melee weapons, entertainment, and armor. Surprisingly up to modern specs, too. You want a monomolecular blade? You can get one. You want a helmet that can repel lasers and plasma? You can get one. Holy hell, how much of this place have you explored? Maybe 5%? I've been doing a lot of poking around, but this place is goddamn gigantic. It's as big as any city you care to name, and if you want to vanish in here, then it's way too easy. We run system scans every 12 hours because it takes 12 hours to run a scan. It's that big. And it's all lawless, Pukey remarks as he runs his organic hand through his hair. Just about. JK answers and Pukey lets out a huge lungful of air. Okay then. Time to get to work, he mutters. This is the best place to start. Rumors run fast and thick and there's a lot of heavy drinking in nightlife. But keep your sidearms close to hand because these bitches be grabby. JK explains before drawing one of the 6 visible weapons on him to stick the barrel against something that audibly protests. And there are fucking cloakin' running around. They're some of the worst, he mutters while adjusting the back of his pants as the sounds of retreating footsteps are heard. Did you just get goosed? Airfarce demands. If by goosed you mean an entire half of my ass was grabbed by an invisible pervert, then yes. Love and longing blades flash through the air as warsword meets warsword. Tri-tight both as they flash through the air. I must admit, I'm not going to be comfortable with this for quite some time, Vernon remarks as he gauges her intent from how her sword weaver to both dodge her swing and try to mark her himself. You don't trust my battle skill? Miro Noir asks him with a coquettish smile. I don't trust myself. You're too beautiful to lash out at and I may make a mistake, Vernon remarks, and she blushes lightly before flicking him. Vernon? We're supposed to be dueling and training, not flirting, she chides him with an adorable smile on her face. Can it be both? Vernon asks impertinently, and she breaks down into helpless giggles, only to gasp in exaggerated shock as he taps her on the shoulders with the flat of the sword. "You scoundrel!" she exclaims dramatically. "Such low and deceitful tactics!" She continues even as the nearby children laugh. "Have it, you rogue!" she proclaims before taking a playful swing. "Ha ha!" Vernon exclaims as he dances away from the sword and swats it away with his own to bring out a ringing sound more akin to a bell than the clash of swords. "Show the sorcery!" Visinoir cheers. "Make with the warfire," Liminoir adds. "You heard the ladies," Vernon says with a grin and deflects Mironoir's next attack as her sword blazes with bright blue warfire. Vines travel up Vernon's sword and overtake the weapon with leaves and thorns in an elegant twist that even has a number of small white and purple flowers through the center. The children cheer in giddy glee as the overlapping thorns and leaves prove to be somehow just as strong as the tritite blades and seem to only grow stronger from the warfire and feed that strength into the life surrounding Vernon. Flowers grow and burst into full bloom surrounding his feet as the grass grows tall and long. They force their blades against their beloveds for a few moments before breaking away with a leap and landing. Mironoir seems to glide effortlessly as Vernon trails a blaze of sheer life as he skids to a stop. Flowers bloom then seem to wither before puffing up into balls of fluff, which are then grasped by the wind, and then spin around Vernon as he braces himself for a charge. There's a few moments of stillness. But before any of the children can shout anything, Vernon launches himself forward before presenting a blurringly fast stab that Mironoir melts away from. He skids to a stop and spins to turn it into a slash that she parries before going for a chop he spins away from to bring his sorceress sword around for a stab that she dips away from. A diagonal slash is deflected, and its returning stab is forced away before he grips the sword at the halfway point to try and direct the blade more precisely. He gets an open palm to the chest and is repelled backwards. He vanishes, and the momentum is carried through the teleport into a massive circular swing that leaves a streak through the air and even tears off numerous flower petals from the sword while she ducks down beneath the attack. Her open palm launches him upwards and he twists to land nearly flawlessly. He then cuts through a ball of warfire and his vine sword devours it with gusto, even as he adjusts the interplay of metal and vegetation. A slash, and the sword breaks into segments connected by the vines. The cheers of the Noir family as he then pulls the whip sword back into a single solid piece to parry her swing. The sheer force of the blow sends him flying back. He rolls with the blow and leaps into the air to send a couple of whip strikes down at Mironoir, who deflects the first one, then dodges the second. Then he surprises her by using axiom along the vines to anchor himself into the ground and pull himself in. Mironoir is somewhat off balance by the strange change in the battle flow, and rather than retaliate while he's open, she jumps back. He gives a spin of his sword and it clicks back into one piece with a smirk. "You delight in surprising people, don't you?" Mironoir asks, and he nods. "It's a simple pleasure in life," Vernon admits before thrusting the whip sword forward. The wooden vines growing around the handle grow even faster, and the weapon extends into an enormous spear. Her dodge causes him to disengage the links and whip the blade after her. She isn't even nicked by the unusual but clumsy attack, expecting to be surprised has allowed her to weave around it. She then cancels the warfire in her own sword, and enhancing her strength to her pinnacle, she cleaves the sword from the spear, leaving Vernon with nothing but a stick. A stick he lashes out at her with even as it grows thicker and stronger in his grip. The sound of metal on wood sounds out until the sheer life of the staff catches her sword in the side and vines begin growing over it. With a grunt of exertion, Mironoir tries and fails to free her weapon, but she does tear the staff clean out of Vernon's grip and he stumbles into her. The sheer surprise knocks her over and the weapons go flying to the glee of the watching crowd. "Sorry, dear, I lost balance." Vernon apologizes as he holds himself slightly over his wife. She simply smiles, snakes her arms around his back, and then quickly pulls herself up and spins them both around so she's on top. "Nothing to apologize for, my love. It was amazing fun." She purrs at him before leaning down to kiss him gently. The crowd hoots and she waves at them to leave. "Little chance of that, my daughter. We live here," Chianoir teases from the sidelines as Visinoir and Liminoir run up to them at a full sprint. "Uh-oh," Vernon remarks in an amused tone as the kiss breaks off and both of them see the rapidly approaching Apuk children. Mironoir turns and grabs both of the charging children to be tackled off of Vernon, who just starts laughing at this point. It was almost dangerous to go outside of the small areas controlled by the Noir family. His stunt at the end of the Broken Shell tournament had snowballed that even people who were there and saw him act were telling exaggerated stories. The things he had done were everything that an Apuk woman would swoon over, and a child would stare into the distance, imagining it happening to her. A sorcerer from beyond the stars entering the tournament to reveal exotic axiom arts and incredible battle skill, then revealing utter devotion to his Apuk wife and easily besting even the most powerful foes. And all of that's before showing himself the most honorable of all and outright shaming his most ruthless opponent before simply walking away. According to some of the Noirs, they can't go into public without 1,000 different questions about him being lobbed at them from every which way. His attempts to apologize for the inconvenience only resulted in laughter, as this was a good thing all around. A chance to boast and play themselves up. These sorts of things are a reason to stand tall rather than be annoyed. "So what you gonna do next?" Vicinoir asks. "Yay! What's next?" Leminoir adds. "You two think we planned what happened at the tournament?" Mironoir asks in an amused tone. "Why not? I mean the two swords and the weird armor and the time power and sorcery and huge control of warfire and Leminoir exclaims, trying to find the words a few times and failing as she considers things. "I got the wacky stick!" Vicinoir exclaims, picking up Vernon's staff, and it lets go of Mironoir's sword as she rushes off with it. "It's called a staff!" Vernon calls after him. "I'm sure your broken spear-haft appreciates the name," Mironoir teases, leaning over and kissing him. He gives a little sigh before kicking up off the ground and then extending a hand to help up Mironoir, who takes it. It's actually a legitimate weapon type on Earth. A solid oak staff can split a man's skull like a melon if you've got the strength to use it properly, he remarks before tucking a conjured flower into her hair. Perhaps, but unless there's a sorcerer holding on to it or it's from the dark forests, then there's simply no form of wood that can harm an Apuk. The very idea is rather silly, she notes, bending down to pick up both swords. "But these... really, Vernon, must you?" she asks as she stands back up to find that Vernon is already right behind her and hugs her from behind. "I think I must, yes." "Now what were you saying?" Vernon asks her, and she lets out a slight laugh. "Where did you get the idea for a segmented blade that is both a sword and a whip?" she asks, and he chuckles. "Video games, cartoons, and my fellow nerds off the Dauntless," Vernon admits, his mind going to a fighting game with a very scantily clad warrior. The image of Mironoir in such an outfit, modified for Mironoir's more generous frame, sends a tingle down his spine. Perhaps it's something to speak about later. After all, some mutual role-play sounds like a great deal of fun. "You've been released from active duty and still working with your fellows," she begins to chide him. "It's not really work. The Nerd Squad are my friends and we're connected by a passionate fascination with Axiom. Is it really any kind of work if it's something you're passionate about and find relaxing to do?" he asks, and she sighs before leaning into him. "Besides, you have your own hobbies and entertainments. Or has playing a yitrin suddenly become a chore?" he asks, referring to the vertical instrument. The things were almost like the Japanese floor guitars, koto, except they had a thick bass at the bottom to allow them to stand upright. Also, when played, a foot was usually on the bass to steady it. It was played with the fingers, and there was a second, more quiet method that involved the player leaning against the yitrin from behind. "Well, no, I suppose not." "You've made your point," Mironoir notes as she collects the swords in one hand and then just luxuriates in her husband's embrace. She then quickly pulls the swords up and out of reach as Leminoir and Vicinoir race up and hug them both around the legs with the staff Vicinoir's been dashing around with, knocking into the swords with a loud clack. "Careful now, these are still rather sharp." "Blows my mind that sparring is done with razor-sharp weapons," Vernon mutters. "Restorative medicine and medical techniques, darling. It lets you get away with everything but outright executing your opponent, and as harsh as it may be, pain is an excellent teacher," she notes before tossing the sharp weapons well away from the two children and near the edge of the yard. "Can I have a sword?" Vicinoir asks. "Yeah! Swords! That's awesome! I want one too!" Leminoir echoes, bouncing up and down before they both split up and bunch up their hands while giving Vernon the biggest puppy dog eyes they can manage. "You two do know that I'm young enough to remember pulling that kind of stunt myself, with my own parents, and sometimes even by accident, right?" Vernon asks after a few moments. His tone is fairly unimpressed, but there's a flicker of amusement in there. "Please!" they beg as one. "If your mothers and fathers say yes, then yes, otherwise no," Vernon says, and Mironoir giggles a little as they rush off cheering in glee. What's so funny? I did much the same as a little girl. It's how I got them to let me start my warfire training early, Mironoir notes with a fond smile. So, odds are I'll be making some smaller war swords then? Oh yes. I'm afraid so. We're a martial people after all. A sword is just a sign of maturity.